Hello all, good afternoon. Welcome to the tea house. This is your humble proprietor, Belial, recovering well from his wisdom teeth removal surgery. Actually well enough to speak today. It's going to be one of those conversational videos where we just talk about what's on my mind and things that have been interesting of late in my own life. I find myself thinking a lot about what Dr. Timothy Wintersick Abdul Hakim Marud, may Allah preserve him, has spoken of in the past when it comes to the idea of liberal empire. And what I mean by that specifically is the idea that we are invited to participate within a liberal space only if we adhere to the identity they have built around for us. A curated identity that they have given us, and how we should act, how we should speak as Muslims and as people of religious conviction in general. Essentially, you are free within a liberal society or a liberal space to be anything as long as you are a liberal. To the point which brings up a issue with modern activism in and of itself, which is the fragility of people within activist and liberal spaces, to the point where simply speaking in a certain way is enough to trigger a response from a segment of society. Essentially, the problems with the liberal space is that it projects a certain type of colonizing attitude onto the people who exist within it. As I've shown in my poem recently, some work of mine, The Naturalization of the Soul, which covers this in some regard, although it also does point at the institutions of white supremacy within the American society. That being said, is that Muslims are invited, and people of religious conviction are invited to exist in society as long as they abide by the secular religion, whether that be the caricature that has become of modern American Protestantism, evangelicalism, in the more literal sense, where the conservatives will tell you assimilation is to convert to Christianity and to abandon your religion. Never mind those of us who are actually American old stock or of European American ancestry, or the people as well who are of African American ancestry, or African ancestors, what I mean, who have been Muslim for generations. So let's forget about the assimilation that Republicans talk about when it comes to Muslims when those two particular groups are brought, because they will still ask us to assimilate, even though we are more American than a lot of the newer immigrants that arrive. And what I mean by that, a lot of newer immigrants, I'm specifically speaking of Ellis Islanders, for example, where some of my own ancestors actually did arrive, ironically enough. However, I digress. Then we have the liberal, who asks you to assimilate to his religion or her religion, which is the religion of their social conscience, the entirely changing narrative in which they express themselves. This neo-Victorian mindset of civilize the man and civilize the savage and save the man, where essentially they will not openly talk about how they find our beliefs or practices as religiously minded people archaic or offensive to them. They want to be seen being performative allies, essentially. And that's the difference between people who adhere to actual Republican values, not the party itself I'm speaking of, the ideas of Republicanism and the ideas of a republic, of a pluralistic society where people are allowed to have freedom of conscience. The idea that in order to live within a pluralistic society, one must be okay with being offended. If you cannot tolerate the quirks of your own allies to an extent, then you simply do not want to live in a pluralistic society. You want to live in a neo-Victorian period where people express the correct ideas or the curated ideas. Or they want to reduce Muslims specifically to an Orientalist curiosity. You see what I mean here? I'm getting down to the fact that both sides of any political spectrum have essentially made any religiously minded person who is authentic politically homeless. Either you can be a worshiper of the Republican right, or you can be a worshiper of the Democratic left. And of course, they all come around into a circle eventually with the same values. Really, and most authentically, I would say that they just want us to give up our convictions and to embrace their own religion. Whether it's the parody of Christianity that the mainstream evangelical right seems to be propagating of late, or whether it's the left-wing entirely current thing changing, there are no concrete morals, liberalism and secularism of the left, which is not even secularism. Our Constitution is freedom of religion, not freedom from religion, in the sense that religion is allowed to exist in the public square. It's just a symptom of society. Now, as Muslims, we have our way of maintaining dignity, which is our authenticity. We are not going to be brought down to an Orientalist curiosity by left-wing Americans, and we will not be stripped of our religion entirely, which either side wants us to, but the Republicans would rather us, in a more overt way, just simply abandon Islam, which of course is not going to happen. It's very telling of society in that regard. But to exist in the liberal empire among the Neo-Victorians is to essentially curate yourself to be seen as Muslim, but to not be Muslim. Which again is the point of the poem I recently wrote, which was the naturalization of the soul, which I very much enjoyed writing. I believe that being authentically yourself is the only way to exist. And if people are uncomfortable with your authenticity, then they do not actually prescribe to the beliefs they are saying. If people value freedom of association, of religion, of conscience, then they have to accept, at the very least, the beliefs that you hold dear to be your beliefs. And if they cannot do that, then they do not believe what they're saying. And that's the trap a lot of us find ourselves in. We want to engage politically. We want to engage on an activist level. We want to help our communities. But when we bring up that the reason we do so is because of the context we live in and because of our religion, that makes them uncomfortable. And to be made uncomfortable is the greatest sin in secular America. That is the primordial sin, the mortal sin is what I meant to say, of secular America. It's to make somebody uncomfortable. Never mind when we are made uncomfortable, it still exists within these systems that have been created for us. Or I don't know if they've been created for us, but essentially we exist and have to tiptoe and curate ourselves and not speak of ourselves in an authentic way. It's called code switching. It's this thing that you do when you're in a space as a minority. You know, as an example, the other day at work, I'm sitting and I'm talking to clients, and somebody's mother was very sick, and we were speaking, and I wanted to say, we came to the point where she said, "Oh, God willing, I just hope everything works out." And I wanted to say, "Inshallah." And I almost did, but I had to catch myself because I am not in a Muslim space. I'm in a corporate space, and I need to appear as if I am a certain person of which I am not. That code switching is inhuman on a metaphysical level. I felt dirty afterwards, to be completely honest, the fact that I could not express myself for fear of somebody else's negative reaction to my own authentic self. And I find that in interactions that you have with people, regardless if they're an extreme Republican. You have the same kind of visceral kind of reaction to it, where they will essentially bar you from being authentically. You can't dress that way in America, they say. Whereas a liberal would say something, you can't believe that in America. And that's where we find ourselves. Religiously minded people are essentially trapped spiritually and politically in America. And the fact that the Pope, the successor of Peter, the pontiff, as the Catholics, as my Catholic viewers and Catholic acquaintances and friends would say, has been threatened by the administration of the United States with essentially imprisonment, which is, when they referenced Avignon, I essentially looked at that this morning and said, that is insane. They said, what, to the Pope? But that's where we find ourselves, where people of authentic religious conviction are essentially told to choose between their humanity or their comfort within society, I would say. We are asked to choose between our comfort in society and our beliefs. And inshallah, we choose our belief in God, whatever your religious conviction will be. But this is just a kind of a ramble of mine today, and I wanted to get this off my chest and put this out into the ether. Thank you for sitting with me today, and it's been Belial, your humble proprietor, and have a good day.